Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. We are pleased to host the debate between the Republican candidates for United States Senate. We have former Attorney General Adam Laxalt, who served in Iraq, Captain Sam Brown, who's retired and served in Afghanistan. Pleasure to have you both here, and we're excited for being the hosts of this debate. Starting with you, Adam, we tossed coins to decide the seating and who got to ask get asked the first question. So, starting with you, as you both are two former military men, this weekend President Biden met virtually with members of the G7 and President Zelensky of Ukraine. The United States is supplying billions of dollars of weaponry, and according to published sources, gave the intelligence that resulted in the death of 12 Russian generals and sank the Moskva, Russia's flagship Black Sea missile cruiser. In your opinion, are we doing too much, too little, or not enough to help the Ukrainians?
Thank you, Sam, for hosting this debate. Look, it's incredibly important that we go back to the genesis of all this. Under President Trump, we had a true peace through strength foreign policy, and we had no invasions from dictators like Vladimir Putin. And where this really started going awry was in the Afghanistan withdrawal, when President Biden had such a disgraceful exit from that long war. And as a result, it showed weakness to our foreign adversaries, and it created the environment for people like Putin to move in. When we went the other direction on the Russian pipeline and helped support getting rid of the sanctions, this allowed the Russians to now have an actual monetary source to fuel an invasion. And so we can't move past that. We need to remind voters in 2022, this is the liberal foreign policy in action. They were scared that moving early, giving Ukraine weapons early, giving them planes far, far earlier would be something that would incite an attack, and instead it would have deterred an attack. As far as now, they've still been slow. They need to continue to supply as much equipment as possible to make sure that the Ukrainians can defend themselves.
Captain Brown?
Yeah, the issue here is really not whether or not this is too much or too little. It's the way in which we are actually conducting our aid. And I would say at this point in time, I have been in favor of us supplying things like javelins for anti-armor, stingers for anti-aircraft. What I do not think we should do is send any troops. Another concern I have, though, is that when we all know that Ukraine has been a place where there has been a lot of corruption in the past, anytime we're talking about sending a lot of just monetary aid, that is something we should all be concerned about. Another major concern I have, and something I think the Senate ought to look into, is why are we forecasting or revealing the type of sort of behind the scenes aid that we are providing to Ukraine? We should not be using our intelligence services and then broadcasting that to Russia at this point in time. That is ill-advised, and something I think the Biden administration is doing because it is one of the few things that Americans think that he is handling in somewhat of a positive light.
Do you want to rebut that? Okay, then I'd like to follow up. Do you believe, Adam, that this is the beginning of World War III if President Putin uses nuclear or chemical weapons to save face?
This is certainly the danger of the situation we're in right now, and why it's important that the U.S. does not put troops on the ground. As someone that served in Iraq, I believe that between the two wars, people have a lot of war fatigue amongst our voters, and I think that's a bipartisan sentiment. So we have to be incredibly careful that this is Western Europe's job to police this action. This should not be our job. For us to be behind the scenes and giving aid as we have done is certainly something we should do. But to get to be leaking intelligence secrets and to be broadcasting these things is dangerous. And but if no question, if Vladimir Putin used nuclear weapons, of course we would have to respond, and that would create a very, very dangerous world.
Captain Brown?
Look, that would be an unfathomable decision by Vladimir Putin, and something that would warrant response. I would hope that if America exhibits the sort of leadership that it should, that there would be only one global response, and that would be against Russia. It would be unified. But at the end of the day, the problem we have is that America is losing its leadership position in the world, and that's something that we need to retain.
I'd like to introduce at this point Victor Jakes. He is a columnist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and he's co-moderating this debate with me. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Sam. And Sam, we'll start with you for this one. Jumping back to domestic policy, over the last several years, politicians ranging from Donald Trump to Bernie Sanders have called for the elimination of the filibuster. The Democrat in this race, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, says she wants to return to the talking filibuster, which would essentially gut the minority party's ability to block legislation. Do you support any changes to the filibuster, and if so, what changes?
No, the filibuster has been a hallmark of the legislative process in the Senate, and I think it's something that protects the minority's voice. And at this time where we have such radical swings, from the left moving further and further left, that even if Republicans are the minority, we ought to be able to protect that voice. And in the event that Republicans have an overwhelming victory, that the filibuster ought to stay in place even for a minority Democrat.
Thank you. Adam?
Thank you, Victor. Look, our federal government was intended to be limited, and the filibuster is a huge piece of that. The last thing we want is for one party to be able to ram a radical agenda down the throats of Americans. And we know Senator Reid, partially lifted the filibuster, which created the judge situation that the Democrats still bemoan. And so hopefully they learn their lesson. The filibuster's been something that has stabilized our democracy and in many ways limited the radical lurches. But we are seeing the most radical lurch we've ever seen from a party in history under the Biden administration in the last year and a half. This is from a president that promised he was going to be a centrist and a moderate and heal the country. He's been a far-left politician, and where would we be without Joe Manchin holding the line, without a filibuster as well to hold the line? Senator Masto has stuck with the Democrats the entire time. She has never broken from her party. Nevada needs someone that is willing to stand with them and isn't going to be a consistent vote for the radical left.
Okay, let's move on. And I should refer to you as Attorney General, not just Adam. With the uproar over the Supreme Court leak regarding Roe versus Wade, some are concerned that with this Supreme Court, same-sex marriage could be in jeopardy too. Your thoughts?
Look, I think that since I got in this race in September, I've never seen the voters so upset with the status quo. President Biden tried to run on this centrist campaign. He promised to bring Americans together. And from day one, he's governed and he's spoken as a hard leftist. And it's made our country more divided. It has hurt our economy. It has driven gas prices up. It has made us less safe. It has made the border wide open. And so these are the things that voters care about right now. These are the reasons why we're living in potentially a red tsunami change election. And so the Democrats are going to do whatever they can to change the subject to things they think are more favorable for them. But the reality is there's no escaping the agenda and the policies of the Biden administration that, again, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has been a consistent, reliable vote for.
Okay, but to go back to my original question, same-sex marriage could be in jeopardy. Do you agree?
I think that that's a pretty wild hypothetical. I think that we need to see what happens with this leaked published opinion. But as I said, Sam, the Democrats are going to start spinning all sorts of tales of woe, and they're going to go completely overboard and say that all of past precedents and all the Supreme Court history are all going to be overturned now. I think that is wrong. I think this is what the Democrats do. They divide the populace, they demagogue issues, and here's the good news, though, is that people are onto them, and they're tired of it, and I think they're going to tune it out.
Okay, Captain Brown?
You know, this is an issue that I don't think that there's any chance is overturned. But the broader question is, why is government in the business of marriage to begin with? And I think this is what Americans are tired of, is a government that wants to get further and further involved in people's lives. And we've seen that not just in, you know, who someone's partner or who they're married to, but in the way that businesses, you know, are limited, or you know, how education is going. And we've got, you know, now schools that want to push indoctrination of children instead of education. And so that's the broader concern, is how do we limit government? And we need folks who will go to the Senate who will be part of that, you know, sort of bulwark and bastion against an incursion into our personal lives.
Do you want to respond to that? Okay.
Sam, just one more question on that leaked Roe opinion. If it happens, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe, would you support any new federal restrictions on abortion?
You know, that's a hypothetical question, and something that at the end of the day, an overturn of Roe would return power back to the states. But look, at the end of the day, I've been pro-life. I've always been pro-life, and my position of being pro-life really was fortified by my own personal experience of getting to the end of my life and actually giving up the will to live, and then now having had the blessing of life to this point from then, knowing how much that I was able to give and to offer and to participate in life. Life is something we should always seek to protect.
So there's kind of a divide in the pro-life community of if, you know, abortion is a state's issue only, or if there's a role for the federal government. So I'm just, you know, curious where you kind of come down on that. Do you think it's something the Fed should get involved in terms of putting in new abortion restrictions, or should it be left simply to the states?
You know, this is something that, as it currently stands, would be left to the states. But once again, I am pro-life, and if there was any sort of legislation to come forward, I would want to see that specific language.
Adam, you get 30 seconds if you'd like to respond.
I don't get the same question?
You know, you have exactly the same question.
Oh.
So the question would be, you know, is abortion, if Roe is overturned, a federal or a state issue in your view?
Yeah, let me first just say why I'm pro-life. My mother had me out of wedlock in the 1970s, and she was in her early 20s, no college degree. She got a tremendous amount of pressure to not bring me into this world, and fortunately she made the decision to bring me here. And so I'm always going to believe that I hope people are going to have a chance to live like I have. As far as, you know, the future of Roe, it is quite clear that Roe v. Wade was invented by the Supreme Court. Scholars have known that forever. That's been taught in law school since I went in law school a few decades ago. And it was always better left returned to the states. It's because it was put at the federal level that made it such a divisive, highly charged issue, and I think it's better left to the states.
Okay, Victor, you get the next question.
Absolutely. Adam, inflation is at a level not seen in 4 decades. What caused inflation, and what would you do if elected to lower inflation, knowing that Joe Biden is going to be president for at least the next 2 years?
Yeah, there's no question this is the #1 issue for voters right now. Nevadans are struggling. Gas is at all-time highs. Inflation is at all-time highs. And this is because of massive spending. Washington has a spending problem. It's probably definitely long had a spending problem. But in the last few years, we've seen trillions of dollars come down the pipe. But what is usually left off the equation is COVID. And the Democrats decided to go the shutdown route. Many warned that you're not going to be able to flip the economy back on and suddenly everything would be okay. Those warnings were ignored, and here we are. It is because of the supply chain and all the troubles that it's created that we also have this high inflation. So we must never go back to lockdowns. We need to have a president that would actually go to work on fixing the supply chain, and we need to stop spending money.
Okay, and I just want to point out that the lockdown started under President Trump and continued into the Biden administration, but was done on a governor-by-governor basis. So some states were locked down, others were not.
Correct. the decision was made at the front end that was perhaps the solution. I don't agree that was the correct solution, but Governor Ron DeSantis, as early as May, knew that this was not the direction. And he took Florida in a different route, which Florida's economy is booming and is far better than Nevada's, and it's a tourist-based economy, and they showed the different paths. Schools were open, kids were in camps, we didn't lose all that education. And so the path we took as a state that Senator Masto, marched right along with Governor Sisolak, was a terrible path. It set our state back, and I think it's going to be very, very hard to recover from.
Okay, so Roe versus Wade is a state's issue, but lockdowns should be a federal issue. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that the states absolutely were in charge of deciding what they're going to do with COVID. I think
Correct.
Governor Sisolak made a terrible choice, and he should not have had this state locked down as long as he did. And my point of bringing up Senator Masto is that she's the senior senator, senior elected in the state. Our people were hurting. Hispanic small businesses were being shut at all-time highs. Parents were losing all that education, especially single moms. They couldn't work and have their kids at home. And if she was a champion for Nevada, she would have broken from the Newsom-Sisolak shutdowns and said, this is not the path for our state. I would have been on the other direction if I was a senator of Nevada.
Captain Brown, you have a lot of time to be able to respond.
Your original question was about inflation, and without a doubt, the blame falls on career politicians. And just as a reminder, most of the folks who are in D.C. don't come from a shared background with everyday Nevadans or everyday Americans. Most of them grew up, became lawyers and went to D.C., and they are out of touch with what we face in our lives. Did you know that 80% of every dollar in circulation today was invented in the last 2 years? It is congressional spending that is driving inflation. It doesn't help that we also have a Fed that is become a partisan tool of the administration. That as they ought to be raising interest rates at a much more aggressive level to combat inflation, they're talking about, well, maybe we do a half point here, half point there. No, the answer is when we have a runaway inflation that is the highest it's been in over 40 years, that they should be raising rates at 2.5 points or more immediately to try and combat that. Look, it is everyday Nevadans that are suffering. The higher cost at the pump, costs at the grocery store, child care costs are going up. It's hurting us at home. And D.C. and the political career politicians there are detached from that reality, and it falls squarely on their shoulders to blame for this inflation situation.
Okay, but if you were to see the Fed raise interest rates in one shot at 2.5%, 2.5 points, would you not immediately plunge the country into a deep recession?
Sam, you and I have talked about this before. I'm not saying it's going to be pretty or easy, but I'm talking about what we need to do is ensure that we're doing the right thing, even if it does cause temporary pain. The damage that they're doing by this runaway spending is going to have a longer negative impact on our country than if we take the appropriate economic steps of raising interest rates. And so at the end of the day, we have career politicians who are afraid of doing the right thing, and maybe they don't even know what the right thing is to do, but that's no excuse, and we need to do what is in the best interest of Americans and Nevadans, even if it causes temporary pain.
Okay, Adam, would you like to respond to that? 2.5 points
Sure,
increase?
I would like to say what I think really needs to be done, which is a huge piece of where we are today is the Biden agenda of the radical Green New Deal. They pledged that they were going to kill fossil fuels day one, and he signed a bunch of executive orders day one, and this started what happened with our energy, which is a huge piece of our economy, especially in light of Ukraine and giving the Russians all of this power financially in this terrible war. He should wake up tomorrow and finally reverse course. He needs to get us back to President Trump America first, energy independence. It worked. We were a net exporter. Fuel was at all-time lows, and this was all part of the economy booming, wages being at all-time highs, and inflation being at consistent, solid levels. And so we need to stop spending. We need to get back to energy independence. That combination will start taking us back in the right direction.
Do you want to respond, Sam?
Yeah, energy independence certainly has a lot to do with it, and it's something that sadly not only did we give up in this administration, but we've moved further away from. And just I want to go back and hit one of the things that Adam mentioned earlier, which is supply chain issues. The problem is too many people who are in office think that they and the government can be part of that solution. The fact of the matter is it is the private sector, it is the market that actually knows what's best. And so when we have politicians that say, well, hey, I can fix the supply chain issue, it's like, no, get out of here. You can't fix it. In fact, you've been a part of creating that problem. But as a result of supply chain issues, everything is in short supply, including backbones in DC.
Adam, you want to respond to that?
By fixing the supply chain, I mean they need to go to work on lifting the government regulations and all the inhibitors of the private sector being able to take off. If you look at, for example, fracking and the shale revolution, they need government relief to be able to get going again. And so that is something that the president should be doing. And by the way, Senator Masto, look at our state. We're number 2, sometimes number 3 in gas. We're competing with Hawaii and California. Never before have we competed with those 2 states in gas prices. And she continues to stand with the administration on these issues. We need a senator who's willing to break from the administration and stand with ordinary Nevadans.
You have a response to that?
Yeah, on the gas, it's important to note that we don't have higher prices here just as a result of less pumping here domestically. California, the pipelines that feed us for our fuel here go through California, and they've got their own special environmental standards for their fuel that on a supply-demand basis creates higher cost. So we're really held hostage here in Nevada to getting fuel that is created on a mixture that is unique to California, and California shouldn't be able to just sort of unilaterally create this standard that imposes a higher cost to others.
So I guess I'll ask kind of, you both have hinted at DC spending and what that looks like, and I think we're on Sam for you starting first, but what are some concrete ways that you can reduce spending in DC, or that you would support reducing spending?
Yeah, so this is one of those fun ones that you hear people mention, but there's seldom any good follow through. One of the things that I've been proposing is that anywhere that we have a duplication of a department or agency at a federal level that also has a state counterpart, that we don't need that duplication. And so I have a twofold plan here. One is start reducing the allocation of money to those federal departments and agencies, and that will start cutting down our federal budget, and it also returns more control and power back to the states, where we already have, for example, a Department of Transportation, a Department of Education, a Department of Energy, environmental departments or agencies. And so at the end of the day, we reduce federal spending, but we also return more power back to the states.
Anything you'd want to do with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
Look, a lot of that is mandatory spending right now, and so we can start with what I just described.
Adam, what about you? What are some ways to reduce spending?
Well, let me first just say that when I was Attorney General, we got more out of that office than any previous Attorney General. In fact, we inherited a lot of problems from then or former Attorney General Masto, but I still return taxpayer dollars every biennium as Attorney General, and so I believe that we need to be better stewards of our money. I think that President Trump started an anti-regulatory movement. The one in, one out. I think that is important to restore the concept that we need less regulations, not more regulations. That's something that will absolutely reduce the cost of government and, most importantly, reduce the cost of the private sector. And I would just say that fraud, waste, and abuse is absolutely a real thing. And we saw when the federal government showering trillions of dollars on the states, we saw an awful lot of COVID fraud in this state. And you have to,
For example?
you have to multiply that. Well, there was a lot of misuse in the spending where people were taking the benefits and they were not using them properly. There's tunes of, millions and millions of dollars. And so I think that it's important that we really get a grip on the projects that government are doing, and we must try to reduce the role of government, and that's the best thing we can do, reduce
So the big drivers of the deficit are still Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Any changes there?
I think that we need to look at some portability issues, and we need to look for ways that people are going to be able to transfer benefits and to find a way to drive down costs.
Okay, and you get the last 30 seconds on this if you care to take it.
Yeah, I mean, just back to other ways to cut spending would be zero-based budgets where departments and agencies need to prove out why they need. We have a chronic issue of people spending all the way through the fiscal year to try and retain their budget and increase it. So that'd be something else, and legislation by appropriation would be another way that we can try and rein in federal spending.
All right, we're going to take a 10-second break here so that we can edit this for our TV shows. So we'll be right back after about 10 seconds. And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're continuing with our debate. This is for the United States Senate on the Republican side in the primary between Captain Sam Brown, retired, served in Afghanistan, and former Attorney General Adam Laxalt, who served in Iraq. Sam, I'm going to come to you for the first question in our second half here. When Harry Reid ran for re-election against Sharon Angle, noted Republican Sig Rogich formed Republicans for Reid because he wanted to make sure in negotiations with other states on the Colorado River that Nevada will be well represented. As it stands right now, the states are working collaboratively to solve drought issues. As a United States Senator, what would you want to see? The status quo with the states doing this, or some kind of congressional solution?
Well, ideally, the states work collaboratively and help solve the issue. But
how would they do that, by the way?
Well, that wouldn't be for me to dictate. But whether it's through governors working together, or perhaps they create assembly or legislative commissions. At the end of the day, we need to acknowledge that water is a crisis here, and something needs to change. I mean, the division of water on the Colorado goes back to an agreement that's 100 years old, and certainly conditions on the ground have changed in terms of population density, where folks are at, how water's been used historically, and so we do need to go back and look at that, and I would hope that the federal government wouldn't have to come in and drive that, and so we give the states an opportunity, but at the end of the day, something must be done.
General Laxalt?
When I was Attorney General, we had to do a lot of water issues, including Southern Nevada Water Authority, and there's no question this is going to be one of the most challenging issues for the next few generations of our great state. Look, the reality is the allocation is not great for our state. It was done a long time ago, and it does not match our needs. And whatever power arrangements were attempted back then, as you mentioned, simply have not become fruitful. And so I'd be open to any solution that will get us more allocation, and certainly looking at a federal level. I think at the end of the day, it's probably what it's going to take. It's going to take a courageous president that's going to have to look in the face of all the power in California, which has so much political power, and say Nevada's getting a short end of the stick, and we need to reallocate the Colorado.
Okay, now you are aware that it took Senator Reid 30 years, literally 30 years, to renegotiate the Truckee River operating agreement. So is this something you would envision that a senator would start, but potentially would, unless they stayed in Congress for 30 years, not be able to finish up?
Yeah, look, it's important if you can get agreement amongst states, and if that agreement was there a decade ago, so be it. But that agreement is not there today. And what we face today is that Nevada's not getting any more water in the allocation. So I'm certainly not suggesting that we just scrap it. Something is absolutely better than nothing. But I do think it's important that we go to work and try to get Nevada a better share.
Captain Brown, do you accept that it would be somewhere in the order of 30 years to get some kind of congressional agreement on water?
No, I don't accept that. I mean, the crisis, the timeline does not allow for us to accept that. It's time for Nevadans to demand more. We certainly deserve better, and California has got so much water that, from snow melt runoff, for example, that just runs off straight into the ocean and turns into salt water, that we should find a way for them and us to work collaboratively to capture some of that and return it back. Even if that means that we need to take more off the Colorado and they take some of that snow melt runoff and repurpose it internally within California, then so be it. But at the end of the day, no, we don't wait 30 years for someone to be a champion over that sort of long haul. We need action soon.
Well, and I just want to point out that the Metropolitan Water District is working on being able to capture some of the runoff that goes into the Pacific Ocean that is billions of gallons of water. But again, this is a decades-long project. Victor Jakes is joining me as co-moderator on this program. He's a columnist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Victor.
Adam, I want to ask you about immigration. As I'm sure you both know, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto has flip-flopped on Title 42, going from opposing it to saying we should leave it in place until there's a plan in place to deal with the expected surge in illegal immigration at the border. But one thing she's not flipped on is her support for amnesty. And so, Adam, I'm going to start with you. Do you support amnesty for any group of illegal immigrants?
So the open border policies of President Biden that Senator Masto supported lockstep until, as you point out, Title 42, they've greatly endangered our country. It's one of the biggest crises we've faced, something voters are absolutely irate about and just cannot believe that our government will not do the basic duty of giving us a secure border, which has led to fentanyl spikes in our state, human trafficking increases. The same things, by the way, that Senator Masto is running commercials on right now, pretending that she's a champion to fight against human trafficking, when in fact she supports the open border policies that have led to the increases in this. So I think that we need to get back to a secure border, absolutely. And I think that amnesty is off the table. I don't support amnesty in any form. That this is something that's creating a magnet. It's creating incentivizing people to come in. We need a moratorium. We need a secure border. All that needs to happen immediately to, frankly, save the security and the law and order of our country.
Sam, same question for you. What are your thoughts on amnesty?
Yeah, amnesty is not something that honors the processes, the law, the people who immigrated here lawfully and went through the process to become American citizens according to our law. And so we need to continue to uphold that. I am not for amnesty in any way, shape, or form. And at the end of the day, immigrants to this country are a large part of what's made it great, but we also are a country of law and order, and we need to follow that. If people want to make changes to our immigration law, which I think that we should look at, how do we expedite the process? For example, I've talked to someone who legally became a U.S. citizen and it took 27 years. It shouldn't be that way. But we can talk about that. But at the end of the day, amnesty is not something that we should allow.
Okay, so you bring up a really important point, which is that for anybody to become legalized after crossing into the country illegally can take decades if it can be accomplished at all. And so my question to you is, the last time that immigration reform was conducted was in 1986 under Ronald Reagan. President Bush tried to get immigration reform done in a comprehensive manner. and that was working with Senator Reid and with John McCain, and that blew up because John McCain decided to run for president. Is there a way to look at immigration not in a comprehensive way, to start taking care of the issues, A, to find a route to legality for the people who are here without sending them back home, and B, to take care of the need we have in this country for workers? Because here in Nevada, every business that you can think of needs workers, and we don't have them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are important conversations to have. It's obviously a large issue that hasn't been solved in decades of debate. We're not going to solve it here at this debate table and, a 1-minute exchange or 30-second rebuttals. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we need to go back and look at the process and system as a whole, break down the different components and say, look, this has been working well. This is something that maybe we can adjust, and go back and put some real work and time and effort into it, and hopefully we end up with something that can be a bipartisan solution.
General Laxalt?
Well, my family came to Nevada as Basque immigrants, sheep herders in the early 1900s, and common refrain you hear is, for generations, people came here legally. And the system we have over the last 4 decades is absolutely unpardonable. I don't understand how we got here. I do not understand how you mentioned one of the attempted agreements. This strategy didn't work. We needed a secure border. First and foremost, it is the first right of nationhood. It's the most important indicia of sovereignty. And most nations in the world, those even that are far more liberal than us, have secure borders. And so it all starts with a secure border. And then, of course, we should be in charge of the policies of who's coming and going, what the needs particularly are. But we can't make those decisions in the middle of a situation. We have 2 million illegal encounters at the border right now. There's no way we can have a realistic discussion about policy. And as far as employment needs, it's important to remind people it is paying people to stay home for over 2 years that created this massive unemployment situation. And it went way too long. The lockdowns obviously had terrible effects. All the COVID policies had terrible effects on our economy and the workforce. And a lot of people still are simply not willing to come back to work. Some states moved right away, cut those off, and got people back to work. We're still not back there as Nevada, and unfortunately, Governor Sisolak's failed in that. Senator Mastos failed at calling him out for those poor policies.
Just a quick response, if you wouldn't mind, maybe 30 seconds or less. We talk all the time about the southern border, but what about the northern border? And that is as long, if not longer, than the southern border. It is longer. And the ports of entry, which is where, up until recently, most of the illegal action was from people coming to this country through ports of entry, legal ports of entry, and overstaying their visas. How would you deal with that?
Well, that's none of this is easy to address, and whether it's better kind of scanning or screening methods at the port of entries, or just actually allowing our federal law enforcement agents to do what they're supposed to do. We too often handcuff our law enforcement agents at the border, and we let the people who are illegally crossing the border go. It's about following the rule of law that we currently have.
General Laxalt?
We need to make this an absolute priority. And the reality is that past administrations have not. President Trump tried to reverse decades-long a slide in this direction, but we need to marshal all the resources we need, whatever it takes, to make sure that we are in control of our ports of entry and our borders. But let me just say that the Democrat Party, they are absolutely committed to open borders. They invented sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, which was such a dangerous and unbelievable concept. As someone that was the top law enforcement officer of the state, to see the federal government working against federal law enforcement, people that swore an oath simply to protect American citizens, that created a really dangerous and toxic environment. We're reliving that in spades right now. And again, Nevada needs a senator that is willing to stand against the left. stand against these radical open border policies. Senator Masto has voted for everything that Biden has put forward, and she has not called out any of the executive actions that have opened this border and made us less safe as a state.
Victor?
Sam, we'll start with you. Social media companies routinely target conservatives. Sometimes they suppress their reach or just outright ban their accounts. Section 230 protects these companies from legal liability even when they engage in viewpoint discrimination. What changes, if any, should be made to Section 230 or laws regarding social media companies more broadly?
Yeah, Section 230 actually, comes out of a part of the 1996 Telecommunications Act, well before these social media companies existed. And so I think for these companies to kind of hide behind that is a problem. One of the things that I think that we should look at is if these companies want to sort of edit or moderate, if you will, what people are saying on their platforms, then they're editors, and they ought to be held to that standard. If they are about free speech, then let people have their voice unfiltered, unmoderated. And look, I know what this is like. I was temporarily kicked off of Twitter completely. Facebook won't even allow me as an individual to have an account. And so this is something I understand personally. But we have to go back, and at the end of the day, it's not going to be this Congress that's been there for 40 years or whatever, in certain leadership positions, that's going to understand how to actually address this.
Adam, what should we do about social media companies?
Big tech is one of the biggest threats we face in our country right now. I mean, free speech is an absolute core pillar of what made America the greatest republic that's ever lived. And big tech has so much power, and their ability to silence speech in the public square is a threat to all of that. And you ask me as a conservative 10 years ago, would I believe in regulating big tech? I would have said it's a private sector matter. But the fact of the matter is, for the big ones, the groups that own almost 90% of these market shares, these are now essentially public utilities. These are public highways, communication highways. And I certainly would support going after 230. I support the advancement of the antitrust, whether it's the lawsuits that are going on or looking at it at a federal level. If you look at Florida, again, Governor DeSantis, he passed a series of laws trying to rein in big tech. And one thing he pointed out is, if big tech can silence me, if it's next September and I'm in a dead even race against Senator Masto at the 51st race for the United States Senate, and I could be yanked off of Twitter, the main communications tool for a lot of campaigns, that's a huge problem. For Facebook, there's this is where you pay to reach voters. If they can pull that tool from me, that gives the Democrat an absolute advantage. And so these are the types of things we need to look at reform. It's unacceptable. And maybe Elon Musk is a great turn. Maybe he's going to move it back in a free market section.
Okay, I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you on time here. Did you want to rebut any of what's just been said?
No need to rebut. I would just say, look, there's so many topics here for us to discuss. There's a lot of depth to explore, and so I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I hope that Adam will join me in the invitation that Channel 8 in Las Vegas has offered to do another debate.
Okay, well,
on the 26th.
all right, and that's great, but I want to continue on with this one. So, Adam, you have spent most of the time during this debate attacking Catherine Cortez Masto. What are your differences with Sam Brown?
Well, look, I was elected to be Attorney General of this state. As you all well know, I beat Ross Miller, who was a prohibitive favorite and a favorite son of both political classes at the time. And I went to work. I was 36 years old, and we were able to create the first ever military legal assistance program. We created an elder fraud unit that had the largest guardianship prosecution in the history of the state. We had the first human trafficking prosecution. I wore the top cop hat. We actually brought law enforcement together, which is why, by the way, they just moved. The law enforcement unions moved from Masto in 16 to me in this race.
Okay, but what are your differences with Sam Brown?
These are the differences. This is what I've done for the state. This is what I've proven in office. Voters have been able to see what they get, someone that's hardworking, someone that is going to accomplish exactly what I say I'm going to accomplish, and someone that's going to fight for them.
All right, Sam Brown, what are your differences with Adam Laxalt?
At the end of the day, I'm a small businessman, a family man, and I'm someone who will not bend or break under pressure. And so at the end of the day, I'm running, in contrast to Adam, to be a champion for Nevadans, especially on issues that we shouldn't give away. Election integrity is one where Adam has failed us, and another is his lack of protecting the Second Amendment.
Adam, you want to rebut that?
For him to say that I failed on election integrities, you know, obviously pretty comical. I was the chair of the Trump campaign, and we sounded every alarm imaginable as the Democrats radically altered our election. And unfortunately, they gave us a system that created the opportunity for fraud and made voters feel like we got a much less safe system. He's been recently attacking me, suggesting that I didn't go investigate voter fraud when I was Attorney General. And, you know, he wouldn't know this necessarily, but the reality is it's the Secretary of State that's in power with investigating voter fraud in this state. And so President Trump looked into a camera and said the only person that he can trust in this state is me, and that's because I have stood consistently and concretely for our conservative values as Attorney General and indeed through the end of the 2020 campaign.
Would you like to rebut?
Yeah, you know, Mr. Laxalt relies on endorsements because Nevadans can't rely on him. The fact of the matter is, you knew as Attorney General that non-citizens were registering to vote, and you did nothing. You knew that in 2016, non-citizens did vote, and you did nothing about that. And then in 2020, when President Trump, Nevadans and Americans were relying on you to be the one to challenge any sort of issues with the 2020 election, the only thing you did was to file a lawsuit that, per your own admission, was late. You should have known better. Nevadans deserve better, and you need to be honest about your record.
Well, Sam, you need to be honest with the voters. One, you were running in Texas and living in Texas when you're accusing me of not doing these things that I never had power to do. The Secretary of State in this state is in charge of elections, in charge of investigations, and so, you know, the bottom line, I'm just as disappointed as the next person. I know Victor Jakes covered a lot of these issues over the years, that there were problems in our elections, and it was unfortunate the Secretary of State did not move on those. But President Trump does not throw away his endorsement lightly, and the reality is he has endorsed me in this race because he knows that I did the best I possibly could standing up for our elections in a state where, in the end of the day, you had a Democrat governor and 2 Democrat houses. They went in and they changed the rules. And unfortunately, there was nothing much we could do about that.
Does President Trump know that you filed the lawsuits late, though? And does he know that when you lost to Steve Sisolak in 2018, you blamed 100,000 Trump voters for that loss? What have you told him?
President Trump has often stated that he's well aware lawsuits were filed late. I was not in charge of any lawsuits. I was a co-chair of the campaign. I was not in charge of litigation. That was the Trump campaign. They hired lawyers. They filed the lawsuits. And so he's just as disappointed as I am that lawsuits came late to the state of Nevada, came late in a lot of other places. And hopefully this campaign, as I've spoken since the media has been asking about it since day one, I've never shirked from this issue of election integrity. We need to be able to be willing to file lawsuits early. We need to be able to have good lawyers that are paying attention and doing whatever we can to try to tighten up our system and disincentivize any potential voter fraud.
Okay, last word here.
So as the chairman of the Trump campaign, at what point do you accept responsibility for the lack of lawyers performing, for the failure of lawsuits to be filed on time? I just don't understand when President Trump has asked you to take that leadership position, and Nevadans, including folks like me who volunteered to get him reelected, are counting on someone at the top to do something, and you did nothing.
Sam, I didn't see you in any way volunteering to be part of that solution. I was the one that had to stand on the line there through the end as the media was attacking me, even challenging my patriotism, someone that served our country in uniform. The reality is that presidential campaigns are run by the National Presidential Campaign. It's always done that way. I bemoaned and was incredibly upset that action came late, but I wasn't in charge. And President Trump understands what happened.
Yeah.
He's not happy with it. And again, Republicans need to do a better job. This happened all across the country, and this was an RNC national effort. They got caught flat-footed. And we simply did not get the resources that we needed here.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this is about, once again, Nevadans deserve better. And we're not going to settle for people who blame everyone else when they fail. If you don't want to be in a position of leadership where you shoulder the burden of executing or failure, you don't have to pursue it.
All right, let's change topics here. Adam, if elected, would you vote for Mitch McConnell to be the majority or minority leader of the Senate?
You know, the biggest problem we have as the Republican Party right now is that we have failed to be on offense. We've allowed our country to drift to the left over the past many decades. I've been incredibly frustrated to watch that. Some of us as state AG, we've certainly fought against Washington. We fought against President Obama. But we have not seen our D.C. politicians find a way to go on offense. And so some of the senators that have endorsed me, like Senator Cruz and Senator Cotton and Senator Hawley, these are politicians that are part of the next generation. I'm 43 years old. They're in their 40s. And I think we all understand that we have to be a forward-leading, fighting party. We need to find a way to go on offense and actually take back ground that the Democrats have been gradually taking.
But
so I would vote for the most conservative person that ran for leader.
Okay, so that's a maybe on Mitch McConnell.
I will vote for the most conservative person that runs for leader of the Senate.
Would that be a no regarding Mitch McConnell?
That would be, I would vote for the most conservative person that ran.
Okay, Sam Brown?
Look, whoever is going to fight for conservatives, whoever is going to be a conservative champion, whoever is going to push for our country not to continue to slide to the left is who I'm going to vote for. But I have a feeling that Mr. Laxalt owes Mitch McConnell his vote because he has even endorsed his campaign. He leaves that out when he talks about his other endorsements.
Adam, you want to rebut?
This is going to be the biggest Senate race in the history of our state. Chuck Schumer has put $45 million in. They've already been attacking me for months and months and months. And the reality is I'm honored to have President Trump. I'm the only person in America to have Governor Ron DeSantis, who's one of our absolute conservative stalwarts. Yes, as well as Senator Cruz, Cotton, Hawley, our young conservative U.S. senators. And so this is the mold that I plan on leading in. Nevadans need a conservative champion. It's something that I was every day that I was Attorney
and
General.
I have to cut you off because we are out of time here, but we would welcome you back to debate again on the program if you so desire. So Adam Laxalt, former Attorney General, served in Iraq. Captain Sam Brown, retired, served in Afghanistan. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks
and
for
Victor
hosting.
Jakes of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, thank you for being here. And we appreciate it, and we'll be back on Nevada Newsmakers. Go to nevadanewsmakers.com. We have archives going back to 2005. Thank you all very much.